welcome to this episode of Getting My Cheese Back on My Cracker. I'm Ashley Nicole, and
I'm Paige Benjamin from Atomic Travels.
And in this episode, we're talking about sex, baby. We want to unravel some of the unhealthy ideas in our community as it relates to sexuality, whether we're speaking on sexual freedom, gender roles, twerking, or who just enjoys sexuality. There are obvious divisions in our community to either extreme. Panel, introduce yourselves, please. Any one of y'all.
So I'm Jazie. I've been on here, I think 3 weeks ago, and Ashley was like, "Hey, so we're talking about Black sexuality. Are you interested?" And I was like, yes. I have a blog and a podcast, and I've talked about this ad nauseum. Also with like human, women's reproductive rights and all this stuff like that. So I'm happy to be back, and I'm really looking forward to being on this panel.
Awesome, thank you. Next.
Well, I'll go. I'm Chiz. I feel like I'm a regular on here now at this point, but I'm the CEO and founder of Culturally Focused, which is a collaborative economy. It's definitely a pleasure to be back on this platform with these wonderful people I already know and people that I will get to know throughout this conversation. So really looking forward to it.
Shaya? I'm Jax. It's hard for me to pinpoint what it is I do and how I fit in, but one of the things that I do, one of the things I'm preparing for in my current career, my next career is I'm a conscious erotic touch practitioner and I'm a certified sexuality doula and just an overall student of sex education and health. And yeah, so I'm happy to see my old friends from Ghana, happy to see an old friend from Atlanta randomly, and one new friend.
Oh man. Thank y'all for holding for technical difficulties. When Domonic gets back on, we'll allow him to introduce himself. Paige, I think it's on you now. Oh, there he goes. Boom.
All right, guys, I'm back. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Oh, there he goes.
All right, I'm back. I'm very sorry.
That's cool.
I think I'm synced up now. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
I may have to get some headphones.
Oh, there he goes.
Okay.
All right, I'm back. I'm very sorry. Give me just a second.
That's cool.
I think I'm synced up.
So while we wait on Domonic to get back and introduce himself, we really want to thank everybody for jumping on, and we really want to get into this discussion. We want to discuss some differences of opinion regarding sexuality. How does sexuality impact your mental health? Anybody can jump on the conversation. This is a free-flowing conversation, so if the question moves you, go ahead and answer the question.
So I identify as a cishet, mostly het, female. So of course there are some privileges that come with that. And there are also some things that I don't have to deal with as far as mental health goes. Like I identify as the gender that I was assigned at birth. So I don't have to deal with a lot of the discrimination that comes with people who identify as trans, or people who are on the spectrum, like the LGBTQIA spectrum. But I mean, there are definitely some, there's definitely been some, not necessarily oppression, especially in my adult life, but when I was younger, there was a lot of, oh, you shouldn't be doing this, or as a woman, you shouldn't be doing that. And that weighed heavily, I battled with that as far as like my mental health went when I was younger. And then once I freed myself from those restrictions and a lot of these, I don't even think they're like religious rules, but I was able to be free mentally. Yes.
Chiz or Jax?
Go ahead, Jax. You got it.
All right. I think you can't be healthy as a person, as a human, period, if all aspects of your body, your mind, aren't healthy. So, sexuality, both in physicalness, like your actual genitalia, and how you feel about your sexuality, is a direct reflection of how you feel about yourself. So if you don't feel, comfortable and free to express the things you want, the things you desire, what brings you pleasure, then those things spill over into all life. So I might not feel comfortable to express how I feel, what I want, what I desire in the workplace. I might not feel like, the ability to speak up for yourself, the ability to know what your mind and your body wants, it's all connected, is my understanding and my experience. So I think they are inextricably linked. Yeah, we should work on freeing both.
Okay. Chiz?
So I identify as a heterosexual black male. I'm very confident and comfortable in my sexuality. To be honest with you, before kind of preparing for this conversation today, I never really thought about how my mental health and my sexuality really impacts one another, to be quite honest with you. I think I've always kind of known who I was and, been free to explore my sexuality. So yeah, that's who I am. I don't think I ever really had any issues on that forefront or really any struggles. I've always been a pretty free flowing person when it comes to my sexuality and my circle.
Okay.
So yeah.
All right. Awesome. And are we back, or you're still working on the audio?
Yeah, he's still working on his audio.
Okay, awesome. So we all have a series of conversations we've had with our parents coming of when we're coming of age. At what age did you guys have, or have you had the conversation about sex with your parents?
So
I
I'll
don't
go
remember.
first. Go ahead.
Oh, my bad. It's funny. I'm sorry for cutting in on our guest. I was talking to my sister today and I was like, we never had a conversation, but I think it's because y'all remember those big old satellites that they used to have?
The satellite dishes.
Yeah, the big ones though. They used to be in the backyards and the country houses. I think that we didn't get the conversation because my mama and my auntie, my grannies caught us watching porn on the scramble channels. So we didn't even get a conversation. We just got, don't turn to those channels no more. You're not supposed to be watching that. Okay. So our summers were ruined.
Okay. Anybody?
I never really had a conversation with my parents in regards to sex. To be quite honest with you, the things that I think I learned was from being a very mischievous child. At my age when I was growing up, what was it? We had the HBO real sex conversations that I used to sneak and watch growing up. So I think that's where a lot of my education came in at, was really watching real sex. Maybe that's why I've always been so comfortable. It never really now that I think about it. But yeah, I can remember, at, midnight when everybody was asleep, creeping and, turning on HBO. I see a lot of head now, so it seems like it's some people that can relate to me a little bit there, with the whole real sex conversation, but never really had a conversation with that. I don't think till after I had my first child was when my mother was kind of like, why you not wrapping it up? And it was like, oh, now I want to have this conversation with you, right? But yeah, never really any in-depth conversations about, what it meant, what's the impact of it. I kind of learned on the fly. a little bit there. And then, you know, it kind of just went from there. So no conversations for me. TV raised me.
So that's a good point there, right? So you went from a child figuring things out on your own to having a child. Now that you have a child, is that something you plan to do, right? Because as a Black male, there's several conversations we have to have in order to understand what's going on into the world. And do you feel like this is one in addition to going out dealing with police as the other conversations that we have?
Yes, absolutely. I actually lost my virginity at a very young age as well. Not to kind of, you know, get too deep into that right now. I'm sure it'll probably be a conversation later. But I lost my virginity at a very young age to an older woman. So it's definitely a conversation I plan on having with my son, and not waiting. My son now is 8, my daughter is 10. So to be quite honest with you, we're starting to have some of those conversations a little bit with my 10-year-old daughter. Not nothing too explicit, but, you know, just kind of frameworking that. She's already having her, you know, her menstrual, you know, once a month. So it's kind of like some of these conversations need to start happening on a surface level. So conversations will happen with her, but also conversations with my son as well. Because I don't want them to kind of go down a road and make it feel as though make them be afraid to have those conversations. Because sometimes we're afraid. Our parents, you know, at least my parents, didn't really create a space for me to come have those conversations with them. And I think that's important because a lot of times we're not learning, you know, or having those birds and bees conversations in our communities like we should. So it's definitely one that I have with my kids, most definitely.
Okay.
He touched on so much.
Well, before we continue, I do mean to interrupt you, but my fella sir, do you mind introducing yourself, and we'll bring you into the conversation after Jazz.
Okay. Thanks everybody for bearing with me. I was having some technical difficulties. So my name is Domonic. I live in Atlanta. I run an entertainment agency called Trillmonger. And we do everything from photography, videos, anything you can creatively think of, we probably can do it. So thank you guys for having me.
Amazing. Thank you for joining. Thanks for getting the audio visual together for an audio visual company. Gotcha. I'm just messing with you. Had to give you a little flack.
For sure. Hey, if something can't go wrong, it will.
So Jazz?
No, so he touched on a lot. So I mean, I feel like I'm kind of fortunate to say that I got the birds and the bees talk. I found out where kids came from when I was at a young age. My aunt told us plainly, she was like, look, so this is what happens. She told us like the scientific side. She was like, so this happens, babies are conceived, they're born. And we're like, okay, cool. But we didn't have the talk of, or I didn't have the talk of actual, so when you find somebody you like or whatever like that until I was older with my parents. And my mom was more like, you shouldn't have sex. And then my dad and my stepmom were like, I mean, I'm not saying that you shouldn't, just know that what the consequences could be if you have unprotected sex or if you're not just safe about it. So, but we all have these. I mean, I had these talks when I was in high school, like middle school and then high school, and it was just reinforced. And yeah, like he brought up a hold on, baby, tell me your name one more time. Culturally focused. What's your name?
Chiz.
Yes.
Chiz.
So you brought up a really good point where you were like, one of the things that I've been trying to do recently, and I spoke about this with one of my therapists, or I have a new therapist, but my previous therapist, we were talking about verbiage and our language and how it's really strong. And we, as a culture, like as a society, have often used the term, I lost my virginity. Like, I don't know where it went. Now you touched on something different. So you said you lost yours to someone who was older, and that's legally something different.
Yeah.
But and if we get to that, that's fine. If not, I completely understand. But I was made aware. She was like, so where'd it go? Like, I was like, oh yeah, I lost my virginity when I was 15. She was like, oh, okay, where'd it go? And it paused. Like I paused. I was like, what do you mean? She's like, well, you said you lost it. So where'd it go? And I'm like, oh. So she's like, so let's get conscious about how we're using language. Did you give it away? And I was like, oh yeah, I gave it away when I was 15. Okay. So, because when you say you lost it, that I feel like it, you lose control in the matter. So, and if it's a situation that you truly had control in, then you didn't lose it, you know?
Interesting.
I guess I never thought about it that way, but yeah.
I mean, it's you know, this is why I asked my first question, right? Sexuality and our mental health and the psychology of it. And I think Jax was kind of alluding to it in her definition of how they both correlate. So Jax, I mean, with that being said, what are your thoughts? You know, losing your virginity, you know, it's in a box somewhere. But in general, like the conversation, let's start with that, and then we can go to the talking points. You know, at what point did or did not have the conversation?
I would ask a better question, or a different question, not better. What is virginity? I think that virginity is a lie. But simply because, so when we talk about the battle of the sexes, right, and we talk about what sex means very different things to different people, to the same people at different points in their life, to the same people with different people. So the whole idea of virginity only speaks to heterosexual penetrative sex, right? So like, if, let's say I'm a lesbian, I'm gonna be a virgin my whole life by the way that we define losing our virginity. And I think it's important.
It depends, because if you're using toys in the room and you break, you know,
if I'm using toys by myself, am I losing my virginity? That's what I'm saying.
That's a good
that points to the exact same thing. That means I can lose my virginity. I can lose my virginity to myself.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? So that's a great, and I didn't mean to interrupt, but yeah, that's a good point that you're bringing up.
As far as the other thing I will say, I think, you know, I grew up in a very religious household, and I think the interesting thing is that you end up talking about sex very early because you know what you are not supposed to do, right? But I would say, I think when everyone talks about what it is they learned about sex, we talked about, you know, learning about pregnancy, we talked about STDs, what we learned in school, but like what we don't ever learn, what we have to rely on other people who don't know what they don't know either, is pleasure. Like, yes, we talk about sex and like, these are all the horrible things that can happen when you have sex. And that's why we have so many horrible things that we believe about the way we think about and believe about sex and the way we interact with each other, because we never are taught of, oh yes, this is this beautiful, amazing feeling that you can have. And you should learn how it works for you and your body. But we don't learn that. We learn like, don't get pregnant, don't have STDs. You know, here's your period, you can get pregnant now. Like there's very little discussion often about what pleasure, the other side of sex, which I think as adults we know that most of sex is good, and you wouldn't know that as a child. Like you wouldn't know that at all.
Yeah.
I think they refrain from teaching us the joys of sex. At least I feel like my parents did, teaching us the joys of sex at a young age, because then I would definitely be doing it all the time. Like if I knew, now, or if I knew then what I know now about sex, man, like. So I feel like it was kind of a preventative measure for them. They're like, hey, so this is what can happen. And then I've had way more candid conversations, especially with my stepmom now, about sex and as an adult. And I'm like, well, why didn't we talk about this when we were younger? She's like, because we didn't need to have this conversation when we were younger. And in a sense, she was right, because I definitely wouldn't have focused on school or anything like that. I'm like, I could be out here getting woo out the back.
Woo out the back. There you go. There you go. You know what I'm saying? Listen, she ain't gonna teach you to Gawk 3000 at an early age, because you ain't ready for that. You know what I mean?
You're not ready for it.
So Dominic, No, let me. I'm gonna get back to you, Chiz. But Dominic, so like, coming up, was this a conversation that was had in the household, talking about sex or preparing you for it?
I think I probably fall in the category of a lot of people where there wasn't necessarily a talk. The talk I got was don't bring no babies in here. And then I don't know where each of you are from, but I'm from Mississippi, which is a very conservative place. And you learn really early on that everything is bad. And so
it's the Bible Belt. You can't drink down there, but everybody gets drunk.
Exactly. And so it automatically gives a lot of people identity issues, because a lot of things that are deemed bad are also probably pretty fun. Also, if you try drinking a little bit, you might like it. If you try some of these things they're telling you are wrong, it's just a weird dynamic. Now that I'm an adult and I look back on it, but it's also the way of the world in a lot of ways. So I definitely didn't get the talk, but I think I was probably more scared into not having sex early on than actually learning a healthy relationship with it.
Did we lose him? Or did we lose me?
I'm here.
No, we're still here.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Cool. I got you. It was me.
I got my AV together now, man.
It ain't me, coach. It ain't me.
He said, tighten up, Paige. He said, tighten up.
I'm doing too much at once. I feel you. My apologies, my brother. So that's you bring up a good point, right? So coming from the Bible Belt, and a lot of us are kind of grew up religious, and we had an episode last season, Prayed Away, where, the resolve to everything was bring it to God. And it sounds like in this particular subject matter, the Bible or religion was being used to kind of dictate how sexuality should be seen or experienced. I know, Jax, you mentioned this briefly coming up religious. Was that the biggest kind of sentiment that was kind of expressed, that you'll be a sinner for life if you have sex before marriage, or just using it as a reason to not have the discussion with you?
So no. So my mother, we spoke about it. So I don't have any kids, and I don't, my parents, I'm a virgin to this day because there's no proof, right? But my mother, it's weird because I grew up very religious, and then my mom left the church when I was about 12, and then really became a completely different person. So not in my early years. It was certainly like, yes, we don't have sex until we're married, but I'm also a product of people who weren't married, right?
Right.
So my mom had since married someone and they had a child. So it was like, oh, this is what we're supposed to do. So second time around. But when my mom left the church, when that wasn't our life anymore, I witnessed my mother living a very full adult life. And it took me, it was hard for me to grapple with that, because you spent my whole like 1 year old to 12-year-old telling me like anybody who does all these things are bad. And then from 12 on, I saw you doing all of those things. Like so I had a hard time dealing with that. But I will say my mother, I wanted to be like, back in Chiz was talking about real sex. So between real sex and Loveline and Dr. Ruth, like I was fascinated with like the ins and outs of all of that. And so by the time I was in high school, before I was even having sex, I was like reading about it and like talking to my friends about it and like giving advice, and like because I was like fascinated by it. And my mother knew that, so she like she gave me a book on sexuality, specifically geared to women. My dad gave me a book at some point too. I don't know, they just knew. But so though those discussions did not exist, even though I did have one discussion with my mom one time. She had broken up with someone, and I was like, he seemed nice, what happened? And she was like, he don't know what he's doing. And I was like, Why are you telling me these things? So for me, it manifests in very strange ways because I had to unlearn a lot of things from my childhood that I'm sure my mom probably wouldn't have even thought about because we were living a completely different life by the time that I was out in the world doing things. But a lot of the way that I looked at her and the way I looked at the world was shaped by what I was taught long before I was thinking about having sex, or long before I was thinking about sexuality and what it meant. So I don't know. I don't know that I can speak to like a lifetime of religion, but that was for me, like my base is very much that, and then it wasn't, which was different.
Okay. Jazz or Domonic or Chiz? I mean, I'll add some of my own. I'll add some of my own real quick. So, like, for me, I'm the youngest of all my siblings as well as cousins. So, coming up, I observed a lot, almost like too many steps too close, right? You know, hey, turn around and just watch TV, right? Knowing that what's going on behind you is something you're clearly not supposed to watch, but they're doing it anyway. But I do think that, you know, coming from my background, West Indian background, that's not something we talk about, right? We don't talk about it because, like you said, just don't have a baby before you get married, or just don't have a baby. But they don't tell you, like, you know, I had, you know, the whole putting condom on was sex ed in high school, ninth grade, right? You know, we grew up in a great era. Dr. Ruth, Sex Talk, you know, HBO, and like Ashley said, some of those glitchy porn channels, you know what I mean? When they would stay on for a little bit longer than necessary. But that's the other aspect of things, right? Like, you know, porn was a huge part of a young man's life. And once again, I can only speak for young men, right? Look, we was look, y'all can attest to this. We was sneaking to porn channels. Now with the advent of YouTube and all these other porn channels, it became something.
We at least used to have to work for it. It's easy now.
Exactly.
So now just log on to Instagram.
Exactly. Right. So now as an adult, you're like, damn, like, you know, I'm glad I figured it out on my own, but how many times how could I have avoided some of the stumbling blocks, right? But I think to Jazz's point, in finding your sexual freedom, you kind of had to go through those stumbling blocks to get to where you are. So, I mean, is the conversation, I'm not going to say is the conversation necessary, but I'm going to ask it, is the conversation necessary? And is it a surface level conversation? Because Chiz is going to have a different conversation with his young lady than his young man, right?
Why? Why?
Once again, it's and this is kind of like it's going to be a follow-up question that I'm going to have, but it's just, you know, it's in the community. It's how that's how we've been, I want to say, conditioned to treat the conversation, especially from a man's perspective, right? From a man's perspective, I'm gonna talk to my young man different than I'm gonna talk to my young lady, and that's primarily because that's what we've been taught. You know what I mean? And look, I'm throwing this out there to spice up the conversation. Y'all can come at me all y'all want. Let's go. I'm here for the heat.
So I'm gonna come at you on two things.
Let's go.
First, I want to know why you said he would talk to his daughter separate or differently than he would talk to his son. Because at the end of the day, they're both, I mean, we don't want to think about this as parents. I'm not a parent. Like Jax, I'm not a parent. Proud aunt of like 11 kids at this point. And I will be adopting my children later in life, but I'm not a parent. So I don't have to worry about having this talk as a parent with my nuggets. But when I do adopt my children, and I plan on adopting older kids, I know that I'm going to have this conversation sooner than most. And is there feedback on my line? I'm sorry, y'all.
No, you're good. You're good.
Okay, cool. But I will talk to them the same way. Like I'm going to have the same, hey, so sex is great. But please make sure that you're doing XYZ to take care of yourself and woo up to bam. But I'm not gonna tell my daughters, oh, you shouldn't have sex until marriage, or say, oh, well, you don't need to be out in these streets, and then tell my sons that, well, you know, just don't get her pregnant. No, I mean, you can have the same conversation with both of them, because they're going to be sexual beings. We're all
I'm not
beings.
a parent, so I'm gonna let Chiz answer that. I'll take the heat.
Yeah, I'm about to say no parent club here also.
Yeah, so I mean, I definitely agree with you. There are some parallels there where those conversations need to be had similarly, where that same level of I think one of the main things that it sounds like you're saying is the accountability and the responsibility aspect is something that both kids need to understand coming up. But I mean, when you also start to talk about a bigger like long-term spectrum from, you know, a young man who's, you know, sleeping around and, you know, not using a proper protection, how you can get someone pregnant. And sometimes that responsibility, once you, all right, and we'll be blank with it, okay? Once you, as a young man, you know, have unprotected sex and you come, okay, you know, you lose all control, all responsibility when it comes to that after that. So you have to understand that what you're letting out of your body and giving someone else, okay, that is control that you're giving someone else. And this is a deeper conversation when we start talking about not being ready for kids. You know what I mean? Because a woman has control over her body if she lets say, hey, I don't want this kid. Or, you know, if I want to, you know, keep the kid. A man no longer has that control. So that's an honest conversation that unfortunately I have to have with my son and tell him, like, yo, if you're going to lay down and you're going to have unprotected sex and, you know, you end up, you know, coming or, you know, ejaculating. I'm so uncomfortable saying this. Sorry, I don't know why. But you end up doing that. You have to understand that that level of control now is no longer in your possession. You've given that up. And then you talk about, okay, you know, because a woman has the right to be able to say, I no longer want this child, or I want to, you know, abort. A man doesn't. So that right there is a total different conversation than I would have with my daughter, to be quite honest with you, because I can have that conversation with her and say, hey, you know, you have a choice. You know, you have an option here in this situation. So like I said, I agree with you 100%. There are some parallels, and I think it's more about the accountability and responsibility aspect. But when you start to talk about, you know, our community and, you know, not having kids and how that can fall into child support and all those different things, I feel as though the way we have created society, like when you hear about a young man that's having a child, he says, well, I necessarily wasn't ready for it or something like that. The first thing society says, oh, why didn't you use, you know, protection? You know, and sometimes the woman is kind of scapegoated a little bit in that conversation of like she had nothing to do with it. So I just think it's conversations that definitely need to have the same, but some of them are definitely a lot more deeper where you got to peel back some of the surface on them. But once again, I agree that, you know, the main conversation needs to be about protection, accountability, and responsibility with both of the kids, though. So that's just my tip. I hope I didn't go on a tangent too much.
So Jax and Jazz, your faces speak wonders. I really wanted to kind of get the thoughts behind the facial expressions.
I have a couple. Spicy. I want to no. Shit, I forgot one thing I was gonna say. I will say, so no, I don't have children, but my 15-year-old cousin, he lived with me, and I was his primary caretaker from 15 to 19. So I had a teenage boy in my house that I had to like talk to, and I will say, that the conversations I had with him were very much like the conversations I am having with you. It was very much like, hey, and it's so. I think it's very interesting. We keep going back to like all these like horrible things that can happen during sex. Like you gonna have me never wanting to have sex or never want to explore what feels good for my body. We're talking about child support and all this. Like that's a lot. Like, and not to say that those aren't important conversations. And obviously, if you had a child young, that's something that stands out in your mind. But also, so the conversations I had with my cousin were like, yes. things you should know about sex. Some people see it as very emotional, and you should make sure that you are very honest with whoever you are with, that whether you want this to be an emotional, long-lasting connection, or if you're sleeping with other people, or if there's, I was like, because you never know what emotions that might bring up for you, and you should be honest with yourself and with that person about what it is you're looking for. You know, if there was something, what I will say is my cousin's a member of the LGBTQIA community. And whereas that he had relationships with both males and females. And so we talked about if there was something that he asked me that I didn't know, like I will look it up. And oftentimes I did know. And also like I would bring up things that that maybe he didn't know to think about, right? So it's very much, I think we should always be like, we should be forever learning. So of course I'm like, yes, protect yourself, don't bring home babies, like or you know, think about what that can do. But at the same time, we're like, hey, don't do shit you don't want to do. Part of the reason why he lived with me was because he was younger and he's like super, super tall. He looks like a grown, like he looked like a very much older than he was when he was younger. And you know, one of the things I noticed was that, you know, older people would be after him in a way. And I was like, you know, I don't care who you like one way or the other, but one thing you should know about sex and sexuality is that there are predators in this world, male, female. There are predators in this world. And anybody who is trying to teach you or guide you or be a mentor to you or show you things, I think it is natural for you to discover sexuality on your own time and your own terms. Nobody, this is my opinion, but I don't think anybody should be guiding you through that process, or you should be relying on someone else. So it's very important to know that like it's fun to explore and learn on your with someone else who is learning and exploring your own. So for all that to say is the conversation I had with a man with a young man were not different from what I had. Now I'm not a man. And what I'll go back to Paige, what you said, this is the way we've always learned it. This is the way we've always done it. The reason sex therapists, sex coaching, and all that, like all these businesses are booming because we're all going off the things we already knew and the things we already learned, and we don't have to keep doing it that way. It's also the reason why we spend this whole like there's this battle of the sexes, because you know everyone's like, well, we already learned it this way. I think if that's the way you want to teach something, that's the way you want to treat something, that's cool. But no, we have the opportunity and the ability to change these conversations at a young age, at an old age, and it doesn't have to be the way we always did it. That's all.
I think that's important. I think you made some great points. I think that from most of us from day one out of the womb, like we're forced into social constructs. Like as a guy, I knew like I couldn't play with my sister's dolls. I couldn't, you know what I'm saying? If I fell, like I had to be tough, where she got, you know, patted on the back or are you okay? And so we're pushed into these arenas, even unknowingly. Like as a kid, like there's not a better term for you don't know what you don't know. Like the whole world is a learning process. Everything that's around you, you're taking in, and you have to rely on you know the people closest to you, which is usually your parents. I always tell people most of the time, if your parents can't swim, it's likely you probably can't swim either. And of course you can always learn how to swim, but I knew I grew up terrified of water, and when I actually learned how to swim, I felt like crazy because it was like so easy. I was like, man, I was missing out on like having fun in the water all these years just because I was afraid to learn how to swim. I thought I was just gonna automatically drown if I hopped in some water. So
what you're saying is you was able to splash around and enjoy yourself.
Yeah, just because it was. I think it's a difference between learning something from fear and actually learning things. Like Jack said, like it's a process of unlearning a lot of things to rediscover yourself. And I think that's a journey that a lot of us in our community are on. It's just a rediscovery phase, because we realize, like, in not just sexuality, but like so many things that we've learned may not necessarily be a part of who we are. It doesn't make it right or wrong, but it may not be the right thing for us. And I think that's super important in sexuality, simply because it's something that nobody can determine except for you. Like you have to look yourself in the mirror, ask the tough questions. You have to, and ideally, no one can help you with it unless you're honest with yourself. And I think that's where we run into issues in society, because there are penalties in life for being gay or being Black or being, whatever. So we have to find ways to, in a sense, survive. I think that's why so many people in the LGBTQ community are afraid to live lives naturally as they are, because in reality, like, we look outside every day and see that there are literally penalties, sometimes life and death situations, by simply being yourself. And so, we can't think like this is something that is easy. It's easier for some people because we fit into easier sectors or, categories. And as an activist, that's one of the first things I learned, truly, because we grow up with social confines, or what I call them, and we learn certain things are wrong for whatever reason or another. And then I remember when I first moved to Atlanta, once again from Mississippi, a very conservative place, and I was just shocked that, like, of some of the stuff I seen, from hair color to what people were wearing, even to how bold the women were here. Like, they shoot their shots, whereas in Mississippi you had to go get it. Like, so just simple stuff. It was just complete culture shock. And I had to, in a sense, unlearn and relearn some stuff, not because I was changing, but literally for survival sometimes. And I feel like life in general puts all of us in that frame at some point or another, and we have to make choices.
Okay.
Dang, it's not even Zoom. I forgot to unmute myself. So I think, Dominic, you brought up a great point. Everything you said was a great point, and it actually moves us into our next segment. I have a clip that I'm going to play to kind of bring us into it. So everybody, brace yourselves. So this is a clip from a show. Apparently, so Chiz got me on this show because I saw you posting about I'm Athlete. But Pay said he got you on it, so I guess this is full circle. So I'm about to play this clip that's going to take us into our next segment. Stay tuned for technical difficulties, because it's my first time sharing my screen on live.
You gotta believe in you.
So we in there.
You got it. You got it, girl.
Motherfucker.
Uh-oh. You need to put yourself on mute that time.
Yeah, so
Hey, y'all said we was gonna talk for real, so I guess we talking for
Hey,
real.
listen, we're keeping it real.
So I thought if I maximized the video, it would take up the whole screen. So it went away. It, like, as soon as I put it on share, the whole video swiped off and showed my background, which I'm glad my text messages and stuff not open. Okay, take two. Y'all ready? Brace yourself.
Let's do it.
You just came back to us again. It's all good. Just take your time. Take your time. Take your time.
Okay. Boom.
Boom, boom. How are you going to deal with it, sir? So when it came to Zaire playing basketball, I had to realize, Zaire, you're not me. Your strengths and your talents is this. Let me tap into that with you. Okay, it's not about me. And when it came to Zaire, let me tap in. Okay, Zaire, let me look in the mirror, because I'm gonna tell y'all something. And people don't want to hear this and don't believe this. At 3 years old, me and my wife looked at each other and we said, "What if? What if Zaire come home?" At the time, the name was Zion. If Zion comes home one day and say, "Dad, I'm gay," or "Dad, I'm this, I'm that," what are you gonna do, sir? That's real. And so what I did at 3, when Zaire was 3, is I prepared myself and I looked in the mirror and I said, "Yeah, what are you gonna do?" Because you in a locker room where all the guys use is nothing but you gay, you this, you that, you home, whatever. So I'm in that locker room every day. What are you gonna do, sir, when it comes, if your child comes home and say, Dad, sorry, I don't want no parts of basketball. I don't want no parts of your life. This is my life and this is how I am. How are you gonna do it?
You thought about that at 3?
I thought about that at 3 years old.
When did Zaya have that conversation with
8 years old, 5 years later.
Okay, so here's my question, right? Because that was important. I just kind of explained to you how I feel about my kids, right? There's an obsession with my children that's probably unhealthy, right? And so as soon as I heard about Zaya, I started paying attention. I became Monday morning father, right? And I said, this is what I do. This is what I feel. This is what I would say. I'm gonna be 100% honest with you, bro. Everything that you did had nothing to do with the thoughts that I had. And you made me check myself, right? Because I claim I love my kids, right? I claim I support my kids. And I'm watching another man who I admire, right? Another man who's lived a life, not only on the court, but off the court, that is to be emulated, do things differently than I would as a parent. And then, very recently, I looked at your child.
Sound went out, or is it just me?
Me too.
Yeah, it went out.
Okay.
That's a nice jacket.
It
Oh,
really
thanks,
is. What is that? That? That's nice.
What's that?
What is this,
This-
Deb?
This is actually a really good podcast.
I
Halftime.
can't hear you now. What'd you say?
I said this is actually a really good podcast. You guys should check it out. They have I Am Woman break off of this also for the ladies. Well, it's for guys too, but it's pretty good.
Domonic,
Yeah, I love it.
Talk to me.
I was one of them girls you met in the club in Atlanta, but I had just
Oh.
gotten there. I met you like my first or second week in Atlanta. I
So
just got there.
yeah, so funny story. Like
The opposite sex, because I was ignorant, I didn't understand. Right. When it hit my doorstep at 3 years old, like I said, when me and my wife looked at each other, right, and the reason we looked at each other is because of this. You know, as kids, I used to put on heels. I used to do all those things. I try to put on whatever my sisters wear. When all my sisters did, I try to do those things. So at first, I said to myself, "Oh no, I did that." So I ain't just doing the things that I did. And then it kept going further and further. And then me and my wife had to look at each other and say, well, what if? And at that moment, everything that I was taught went out the window, because now I'm a parent. And my sole job and my sole responsibility is to make sure that this kid grow up knowing that it's supported and is loved.
All right.
Hmm.
So that brings me to our next talking point, our next question. I'm sorry, Alexis. Our next talking point, our next question is, so with what we discussed so far, what do you think about the biases regarding to gender and sexuality? And do you think that this is an example of how the Black community views gender and sexuality?
Absolutely. So Domonic brought up a good point where he was like, before we exit the womb, we are like forced into societal norms. And you see it at these, I'm really not a fan of gender reveals like at all. But I was like, I really don't. Like, I don't understand why people are like, hey, my child has a penis. Boom. Like I don't get gender reveals. But you see them like, oh, guns or bows, or footballs or pom-poms, whatever like that. Like you're forcing these children into these societal norms, like these gender norms, and before they can even think or they're even here. And then you get situations like Zaya, where she was like, hey, so now I don't identify it like as the gender that I was assigned at birth. And I would love for you guys to respect me like I respect you, and call me by the name I want to be called by. Address me by the pronouns I want to be addressed by, and not assume that just because I was assigned male at birth that I want to play with basketballs or ride bikes, or I can't cry when I get hurt or whatever like that. Like we can't say that we want kind of like me jumping into the future. We can't say that we want men who are whole emotionally and who are whole like mentally if we don't let them express emotions when they're younger. Like we can't say, oh, well, he don't talk to me. Well, his family didn't let him talk when he was younger. He wasn't able to feel his feelings and emote when he was younger. And we can't raise our children like this, male or female. We can't raise our children like this and expect them to be whole adults. So I'm not a big fan of gender norms at all. And I fight heavily against them. And I ask people all the time, why? Like, if you say you want to do this, why? Tell me why you are continuing down these often detrimental norms that have been placed on us as a society, not just in the Black community, but heavily in the Black community, but across all communities.
Yeah, those are really solid points, like from top to bottom. Like it's like, once again, going back to like the conversation of like, it's you got to make you feel like you have to make a choice in areas, and like sometimes you aren't ready to make a choice, or maybe you aren't comfortable and you're still pushed. So I think once again, I'm really glad that you picked this clip, because like I'm a huge Dwayne Wade fan. Like he's probably like one of my favorite athletes, and to see like someone who's in this level even bring these conversations to the forefront, it means that we're hopefully headed in the right direction.
Okay.
You would, Chiz?
I am on a totally different side of the park than our other two representatives on the conversation. I feel as though it plays a role when we talk about identifying as male and as female. That's my personal opinion. I do agree with you that we need to stop making men feel as though, if you show emotion, that's weak. Those conversations definitely need to be had, but I don't think that necessarily needs to be tied to a gender. So I agree with you when you say, men shouldn't be, taught to not show that emotion. That's a big problem within our community. Agree 100% with that. But I quite honestly believe that if you're born with a penis, you are a male. If you're born with a vagina, you are a female. There's no need to confuse the two. Like, that's how God created you. That's how you were created. Those are the terms that apply. Now, if you're a guy and you don't want to play football, that's fine. Doesn't make you less than a man. So I agree with you on that. I just feel as though we're just going down a slippery slope when we just allow people to just say, hey, this is how I feel today. This is who I am. I just feel as though it's a slippery slope for our society to just create those spaces. So yeah, I respect you all opinion. And I'll say this about D Wade. I didn't necessarily agree with D Wade from a parent's perspective. I feel as though it's a responsibility to, teach and nurture your child. But I will say that after hearing what he said about, I'm just wanting to see his child be happy and him just figuring out the best way to support, it completely kind of changed my view on him and how he was dealing with it. Because like Ryan Clark said, I had to sit back a little bit and think like, damn, like what would I really do? Would I really try to force something on my child that he or she, didn't like? No, I wouldn't. So I stand with him in regards to, him supporting his child. I just don't know how I personally would deal with a situation like that.
So Chiz, real quick,
yeah.
before you finish that, and I don't, anybody else can jump on Chiz as well. I'm not jumping on you, I'm just bringing something up. So the reason that clip was brought up was for this portion of the segment, which, we have a level of discomfort of sexuality and gender identity in the Black community. I think we're probably one of the last to the party when it comes to accepting the fact that this is something that exists within our community. So are you saying that
if you're born a woman, you're a woman. If you're born a man, you're a man. And it's so does that mean you would just continue to project the masculine aspects of that gender or feminine aspects of that gender based on that alone, and not recognizing at some point or another that child does not register or understand what you're trying to project on them?
Projecting what aspect? What do you mean in regards to projecting what?
So it sounds like from what you're saying, it's more of a nature versus nurture, right? You're nurturing you're nurturing a child in the social aspect of things. So socially, he or she is born with a particular chromosome, so therefore that's what they should be, but not nurturing the fact that maybe they may not feel that way, right?
So,
and so go ahead.
But that's who you are, though. Like, that's what you were born as. So when we sit here and we talk about transgender, right, there are direct differences between males and females. When we talk about what we're going through right now with sports, where you have someone that's transitioning from, a male into a female, and you see them turn over into a sport and completely dominate, that's not right. Like, there are some things that need to be kept intact. If you are born a certain way, that's who you are. That's where you were born at. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell my son that, oh, if pink is your favorite color, then you're not a man. I'm not going to tell my daughter, oh, if blue is your favorite color, then you're not female. Like, I'm not looking to push those type of, projections on them, not whatsoever. I'm not looking to, tell them that they're any less than what they are, but their preference. But if you're a man, you're a man. If you're a female, you're a female. That's just how I feel about it.
Jax, you want this or you want me to handle it? Because I feel like we're on the same wavelength. You want to handle this one or you want me to?
No, I don't.
Hey guys, I feel like we got to team up for real. I feel a little bond going on over there, man.
I think so. Let me set the stage real quick, right? So, this is an open dialogue, and at no point we want anybody to feel attacked. This is definitely everyone's ability to speak freely upon their opinions and their ideologies. So, I just want to have that as the stage, and not putting Chiz out there as a martyr, but he's expressing an opinion that a lot of people actually feel. Right. And so I want to set the stage to ensure that the conversation is informative and not combative, right? There's definitely, we are definitely in the right space to have a difference in opinions. We just don't want it to get to a point where there is. Go ahead.
I appreciate you trying to have my back, brother, but I got thick skin.
Oh, so no. I wasn't saying for that.
I'm all for difference in opinions here and everybody's opinion.
Right.
I respect y'all.
It's not just for this. I just wanted to make sure that the audience also understood this, right?
Yeah, I definitely. That's for the audience.
We would definitely love our audience members to join the show and never feel as though that I can't jump on that show because I'm gonna feel attacked. Everybody on here got super thick skin, and I just wanted to say this for the audience so that they know that the panel are professionals. They are amazing individuals that are understanding of having open and free opinions. So just wanted to put that out there.
His friend. No, I honestly. No, when this started, Ashley said she was playing that video, and I knew you were going to be on here, and I follow you on Facebook, and I already knew. But the only thing I will say, because I know I'm not going to be able to change your mind, and I hope that not today, at some point, that something causes you to think in a different way about it. But that's not what I do. I'm going to be able to do here. What I will say is two things. First thing is just a why and X, like, chromosomes, that doesn't necessarily always correlate with genitalia. So I think we talk about the science of it, and I'm not like and that's not something I don't have it citable here, but that's an easily Googleable thing. But like that has been proven that the chromosomes don't always line up with genitalia. The second thing I will say is whether or not you fully understand or accept people for who they choose or don't feel like it's a choice for them to be. I think where I have a hard time with us as Black people when we have such a hard time understanding other people and their plights is the same for us. It hurts. I don't think it hurts anyone or anything at a base level, because at the end of the day, I don't think any of us here are coaching a team where we have to make some of these other decisions, these bigger decisions, or deciding for the Olympics who can play what. But at a base level, I think we can call people what they want to be called, address them as they want to be addressed. Whether that is, as long as it doesn't hurt us in any way. I could say a lot more. I feel very deeply about a lot of it, but I think at a minimum, Malcolm X wanted to be called Malcolm X. We called him that, and you can say it's a false equivalency, but it's not. It's at a base level where you're actually going to interact with it or engage with it. It's just treating people the way that you want to be treated. Muhammad Ali wanted to be called Muhammad Ali. We called him that. I think if when we're talking about children, we're talking about people are worried about like, well, what will people think, or what will the children think? I think it's a very good lesson to teach children to just respect people the way they ask to be respected. That's all I have.
Can I ask a question? And I just want to ask one rebuttal, Jack. Is there ever a line there though?
Sure.
Yeah. And so you said people deserve to be called whatever they want to be called. Agreed. Is there ever a line though? So if I wake up today and I'm like, yo, I'm walking around, my skin is Black, but I feel like I'm a white man today. Am I a white man?
So okay, I just want to I love that. I love that you brought that up, because I get this a lot whenever we talk about, or whenever I have the conversation about transgender or anything outside of like the cishet norm. It's not so oftentimes folks think that, you wake up today and I decide that I want to be a man, or I decide that. That's not the case. I knew from birth that I was cisgendered, mostly hetero, mostly. I knew that from birth. Every gay person I've met in my life has known from birth, from a very young age, that they were gay. It wasn't just I woke up the next day, or I woke up at 15 and decided I was interested in men. Their parents, and I mean, you see this in stores, like you see onesies with future lady killer, or she's knocking the boys dead, or like that. You're projecting sexuality on infants, like, and then they'll be like, oh well, that kid doesn't know he's gay, but you knew he was straight. Like, you can't have it both ways. Like you can't have it both ways. So you can either say that people know from a young age that they are what they are, or you can say that, I woke up and decided that I wanted to be this. Like there's no, just like you knew you were a straight man, they know they're gay. Just like you knew you were cisgender, they know they're transgender. Like you just know. And like Jack said, I don't want to say you owe them that respect, but you should give it to them. You should give people the respect that you want, at least, And as far, you brought up a good point about sports, and that's an argument that's often given out. Oh, well, a trans woman is she's going to have an unfair advantage on the track team or whatever like that. And you see like this one situation out of millions or hundreds of thousands, and that one is spotlighted. And they're like, well, that's not fair to those who have been training. Bruh, Serena Williams is cishet.
But Serena Williams is a different beast too, though. She's a one in a million as well.
But she's also female. I mean, she's also female who was born a female. Like, I feel like you discount all of the women. I feel like you discount all of the cishet female athletes who have done great in their fields by saying, oh, well, once you get a trans woman in there, they ain't gonna be no good. Like you discount all their hard work.
I'm definitely not trying to play tennis with Serena. Like, it's not gonna happen. Not gonna. I'll be embarrassed. Like, she just decimate me. I'm
sorry.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't want to cut you off.
Go ahead, Dominic. I'm sorry. I'll go after because it's a conversation for all three of y'all now at this point.
I think that overall, like, once again, we have to allow people the space to be, who they are, or whether we, understand it or not. And I think for me, once again, as an adult, looking back, I think most of us can look back on our childhood saying, like, it was stuff maybe we didn't understand or didn't understand fully. And now as an adult, it's like, like, dang, like, that's what was going on, or you know what I'm saying, that's what was happening. So I think it's important to, because I know I have family members that they're gay or they're trans. I have almost a few in each category. And growing up with them, looking back, like, yeah, like, he's been this way, like, since before I could remember, or she's been this way since before I could remember. And I'll say they're just as consistent then as they are now. And so it made me, when I got into a space to where I was around people I didn't understand, or I was around, people that I may not necessarily have agreed with their lifestyle, and I still may not, it just gave me a base level of respect. Because I think if anybody can understand being ostracized and being separated and put apart and made to feel bad about it, is Black people. And I always tell people, like, in life, we have what I call regular people issues, and then we have Black issues also. So everything's compounded. And I always say it's nothing worse than being Black, and, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm a Black man, so I'm still near the bottom of the totem pole, but I often say, thank God I'm not Black and gay. And it's horrible that I even have to think like that, because I see some of the struggles that, my young gay Black friends go through, or my young Black trans friends go through. And it's like, man, like, I never really knew the dynamic of how serious it was to just not allow people the space to literally just be who they are. And it just really started to change my mindset on how I even approach and give space and respect to people.
Dominic, I would just say, I understand what you're saying, but I have a hard time with the framing of, like, thank God I'm Black and thank God I'm a woman. Like, I can't imagine being something else. I understand, like, what you mean, and like in America, but I don't know. I think I get what you're saying, but I feel like we can frame that better, because I don't want to.
And I'm sure we can frame it better. I know what you're saying. And I said it like that on purpose, because we are here for understanding and we are here to talk. And so maybe you can give me a better way to frame it, because, like, that's one of the issues I feel like we have in these conversations, and why we are afraid to talk about them, because sometimes we don't quite know how to frame things, or we are scared that we may offend somebody, and we walk on eggshells. So, like, I'm more than willing to be open to making mistakes in this conversation. I'm willing to be open to help. Like, I would love for, if you have any extra knowledge on how you would even frame stuff, like, I'm all down for that.
Hey, Jax, we're trying to get Dominic not canceled, okay? So Dominic, I mean, between Chiz and Dominic right now, somebody's gonna get canceled by tomorrow.
I'm not trying to cancel you. I just want to. When we talk about Blackness, and yes, there's struggle, but there's so much joy and beauty too. I just don't.
It is, but
I don't know what the right word, but
but
it's unfortunate to be born in America in these situations sometimes. But I wouldn't.
These same problems go on all over the world.
So I kind of want to circle back a little bit. Sorry, Paige and Ashley, for kind of taking over here a little bit, but
it's an open conversation. Enjoy it.
Okay, so I respect all your opinions 100%. I love conversations and dialogues like this. But what I'm still trying to get from you all is, where is the line drawn, if there is a line? And to
why would we be drawing lines?
Okay, so
why would we draw lines for other people?
Okay, so if I'm a 50-year-old man, right, and I say, hey, I've always felt like I was a child growing up. I always felt young. Is that acceptable? Are we saying, hey, that's cool, accept him for who he is? Is that okay? Is that a line? Are we not accepting him? Like
He's saying he's a
I
child? I can't hear.
yeah.
I missed that.
I think that
So
those
if
He's
scenarios,
equating transgender to pedophilia.
I think that those scenarios draw uncommon, like it's not a parallel.
No.
Saying
why not?
So
Why
how does a perversion turn into it doesn't compare to someone. D-West said that they noticed when Zaya was 3, they noticed that they was going to be preparing for this conversation. So that would mean some child, some 8-year-old was always crawling around with toddlers. I don't understand how we set up that scenario so that it is a.
Did you say they feel like a child, or they feel like they should be with
now?
children?
And this is where I have and this is where for me I kind of misunderstand this whole. Oh, if this person wants to identify this is who they say we are supposed to accept it. That's why the question I initially asked is there a line? If there is a line, where's the line drawn? Because
and when they're harming someone else, if you're bringing in somebody else and harming a child.
Well, I think your use case was actually misinterpreted. So can you reiterate your use case? I think what he was saying was, if I'm an 80-year-old man, but I feel like a child, right? Is it okay for him to continue to feel like a child, not to be with a child? I think that was lost in translation. And I think I just wanted to clear that up. I heard it, but I think in the midst of your earbuds are choppy, Chiz, and so that's probably why the conversation is coming in and out.
All right,
but
y'all hear me better now?
Yes, much better. So to Chiz's
I kept
point,
asking y'all if y'all can hear me or not.
No, we heard you. It was just going in and out, and we weren't sure where it was coming
from. That's just an example. Now, once again, I'm not advocating for any type of discrimination, anything like that. But my question is there a line? And if there is a line, where is the line drawn? Because you keep saying, accept, if that's who they say they are, that's who they are, without any type of pushback or anything. It's like you're just free to do, be, and say whatever you are. And there are laws, there are rules, there are somewhat societal norms that are put in place for a reason. You can't just let stuff just run amok and just be like, oh, that's who they say they are today, that's who they are, or that's who they felt as though they've always been, that's who they are. Like, it's to me, it's just a slippery slope. That's how I feel personally.
So to your point, the example you use, go ahead, Jax, go ahead.
I have 2 things. Hey, as Black people, we should realize that, like, when we're saying, like, these rules, like, these rules are in place for a reason. That's some real colonial ass shit. If it does not feel spiritual, if it does not feel like the rules that we create collectively in a community, and I just want us to recognize when we are like, oh, the powers that be say so, it should be so. In Ghana, it said that, like, it was a beautiful thing that the British
don't
people
use Ghana as an example in this one, Jackie, because it's
colonization. It's colonization. Whether we're talking about our genitals, our bodies, like everything that we have learned up to this point is been taught to us by puritanical cultures, right? But the other thing I will say, I want to answer your other question. There are and we're on a sexuality conversation. There are absolutely grown people that walk around fetish clubs that enjoy being babies, and there are actually people who enjoy sexuality with them, and that it's between consenting adults. So the answer is yes. For me, there is no line unless you're harming other people.
Okay, and then I wanted to add on top of that. So you said the age thing out. Even if we're not using sexuality, so completely take sex out of the equation, you're saying 80-year-old is saying that they feel like a child. We have a term for that, being young at heart. Like, we literally have a term for that. We recognize that. Having youthful energy. We, as a culture, as a society, have a term for that. So we have somebody, oh, they're youthful. Oh, they're 75. Oh, you don't look a day over 40. Oh, you're young at heart. Look at him out there acting like a 30, like. So we have terms for that. So it's not like we don't. And I just wanted to make sure that you weren't, like I said, I don't want to get canceled. I want to make sure that you aren't doing what
no.
have
I heard you.
done
No,
when
but
it
you
came
know, but
to.
you know what? I
Go
heard
ahead.
you when you brought up the pedophilia aspect.
Yeah, because a lot of people equate that.
point,
They'll say, "Oh, gay, LGBTQIA," and they immediately go to pedophilia, or they immediately go to bestiality. Like they're like, "Well, it's a slippery slope, and you gonna fuck dogs and all that." And I'm like, "Wait a minute, that's not where we're going with this."
I mean,
They're
so
not
when I first initially said it, no, that's not where I was going with it, because you know it's I feel as though it's just this is a slippery slope, but we have to understand as well, when you look in society, that you know those type of conversations are being had though too. Like, we can ignore it, we could try to say that, you know, it's not the same thing, and I got 2 young kids, I'll shoot anybody that try to do anything like that, but those type of people exist as well, and they're trying to use the space that we've created for, you know, the LGBTQ, you know, AI or IA, my apologies if I mess it up. They're trying to use that same level of acceptance that community is asking for it to be accepted as well. And I don't agree with it, but logically, when you have that conversation now, you say, hey, just accept me for who I am. How do you combat that? By just simply saying, oh, you know, they are a child as well, but you're sitting here saying that you are okay with a child as well identifying as transgender, or identifying as lesbian, or identifying as bisexual, or identifying, you know, as gay. So like, where is the line drawn here? Like, where, like, it gets mucky, and I feel as though it's a slippery slope in that aspect. I really do.
So let me jump in real quick. So Jax presented a point, and I think this is kind of a sentiment that's been presented across the board. A lot of the existing social constructs were not made for certain subsets of the community or of society. One, a lot of the social constructs were not made for Black people. They were not made for non-cis het people, right? And so when we look at the communication that goes out around those people that don't fit within the social construct, there's also the other thing that goes out. There's fear-mongering that goes out as it relates to, if you don't understand, let's set a level of fear so that we can continue to divide our communities, right? And so to what Jazz was saying, you know, it's what we communicate out into the world is very important, right? I think Jax has been trying to portray the beauty of things as it relates to sexuality, and the conversation has gone into
sorry.
You know what I mean? Oh no, never need to apologize. I think it's there's 2 sides of the conversation that we should always keep in mind, right? Mm-hmm. There is where Chiz is coming from is a genuine place from his experience as a parent, right? Mm-hmm. And from his experience and his upbringing, and what is portrayed to us. There's a lot of propaganda and there's a lot of messaging that is put out there that we don't always have control over. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the times when there's fear, the messaging that invokes that fear is what's heard loudest, right? And so I want to make sure that we are all on the same page and understanding that, to your points, right? When you guys misheard what he was saying about the old guy, mm-hmm. you know, wanting to be young, there was that you guys kind of went the other direction, right? And that's why I wanted to bring him back to bringing the use case back. But then on Chiz's side is there is that fear within the community that you start opening unisex bathrooms that, you know, somebody may want to do something to my child. Unfortunately, there are bad people out there that want to do bad things, but I think we can't project that energy out into the atmosphere, right? If we continue to project that energy will return. So let's switch the conversation.
Wait, real quick.
Come on, Jazz.
I know. I'm gonna make this real quick. Give me 2 minutes, real quick.
Go ahead.
I work in the field that I am now, that's completely different from what I studied. I studied criminal justice. I actually did my internships with juvie sex crimes right here in Houston. So I saw the worst of the worst. And you want to know who was perpetrating these crimes against children? Straight men of esteem. It wasn't LGBTQIA members doing this. These were the firefighters. These were the pastors. These were the principals. These were the people who society saw as normal, perpetuating these crimes against children. So, like Paige was saying, this fear mongering, it's worked, unfortunately. And so that's why you have this correlation. Well, they're gonna go after the kids. No, you know who's going after the kids? Chad, David. But like these are the men who are going after the kids, not it's not the other, like it's not the LGBTQIA, the alphabet gang. I'm just gonna say the alphabet gang. It's not, and it's sad that message has gotten heard the loudest. Like they say, a lie travels 3 times as far faster than the truth, and that lie traveled so fast, and people believed it for so long.
And I just want to jump in before Paige moves on to his next point. I appreciate you, Chiz, because I literally read through all the comments, and whenever every time you're having this discussion on your page, and I know that you have that particular view. I do apologize for misinterpreting what you said, and I know that from our panel, my lovely panel that I picked, I know that all of y'all have you guys' stance. And I think that I may be one of the people, like, while I am here for the freedom, I'm also in agreement with Chiz. Like, I don't know. Some situations I look at it and I can understand. In some situations I look at it, I'm glad that D-Wade is able to support and love his child. So it's like, I think that that's one of the things in our community, and I'm glad we're having this conversation. We gotta figure out how we feel about the conversation without just completely throwing away the other spectrum. And like Paige said, eliminate the fear mongering. Okay, I'm done. Sorry, kid.
Thank you, Ashley. So I want to, before we move over to the next segment, I really want to talk about the other aspect of sexuality. And Jax, you kind of alluded to it earlier, right? There is and this is something that I've come across, right? There are women out there who have not experienced pleasure to the sense where they don't know whether they've come or not. They don't believe in sexually pleasing themselves to the point, you lost your virginity to yourself, right? That's a whole other conversation. Not you.
I said I was still a virgin. I didn't lose my virginity to anybody.
Not you per se, but there's the whole there's your side of the spectrum, and then there's the other side of the spectrum. Not to call them, inexperienced, but and this is also another form of controlling one's sexuality. Is there's a subset of women who've been told, oh, you don't do that. A man is supposed to please you. A man is supposed to do all these things. But if you don't know what pleases you, how do you truly enjoy sex? Because, for guys, I don't know about y'all, but I learned early on what felt right. You know what I mean? And it's one of those things where our appendage allows us to experience it easier, if that makes any sense. The ongoing joke is, your 13-year-old is in his room wasting away lotion and socks. You know what I mean? you don't hear that same sentiment as it relates to women. So the question here is, at what point do we kind of free ourselves and allow us to enjoy ourselves sexually?
I think it comes with education, to be quite honest with you, educating yourself. And then just finding out, what you're comfortable with. And then I think, like, for me, even this conversation, I find myself laughing, but it's kind of because I see myself in my mind like I'm uncomfortable a little bit, and I don't know why, right? Because it's still a conversation of like, when you talk about sex is supposed to be more private, more personal. I feel as though it's like what we've kind of been taught through society is like what you like, you keep to yourself. But what I've learned is when you're with your partner, you need to be vocal. You need to let them know what you like, what you don't like, and have those conversations. Sometimes we don't. And I think that contributes to the fact of why we see women that, aren't, pleased properly, because men, we could be selfish. And we don't ask those questions to say, hey, what can I do better? Like, or, in the process, asking questions or talking. But to answer your question, education is number one. Like, you need to be educated on it, 100%.
I agree. Oh, go ahead, Jax. Go ahead.
No, go. Many things. I think when we say like, how do we for ourselves, when you know better, you do better, right? But that's like hard. It's very fucking hard, right?
I said sometimes.
Huh? What did you say?
I said sometimes. You said when you know better, you do better, and I was like sometimes.
Right. So education, but education what? Like there's no book on my body. Like you should be, we should
porn.com. I'm joking.
And that's why y'all not pleasing our women.
Time to level up. There's so many other ones that are way better searches.
So, things porn can't teach you. I would say, and I would also, and I also wouldn't just put it on women. Like there are women who are not reaching their, I'll say there are women who are not fully reaching their full potential of pleasure. There are men who are coming that are not reaching their full potential of pleasure. We do what comes easy. We do that what we've seen in porn. But there's so much possibility that exists through orgasm, through touch, through breath. Like you can change the fucking world through breathing through an orgasm, but we don't know that. So I think and it's defiance, right? It's also like decolonizing what we think we're supposed to be doing, but also I think for the purposes of this conversation, decolonizing the way we teach and talk about sex too. So for yourself, just start touching everywhere and taking your time touching everywhere and trying anything that interests you. For the future in general, teaching other people to start touching themselves and start really exploring what feels good and what feels right for your body and connecting the things that you want with what you ask for and what you do for yourself. Somebody's at my door. I will be back.
No, y'all hit the nail right on the head. So it's a combination of both, like education and experimentation. Oftentimes, especially as I grew up in the church, so the whole purity thing was forced primarily on girls, which is weird. But it's like, oh, you don't need to be touching yourself, or that's not of God, or whatever like that. And you don't know what you're gonna like. Like I can't tell a partner what I like in bed if I don't know. Now, granted, I can't choke myself properly, but I know how I like to be choked, so I can express that to a partner. But that's passive experimentation. But you have to do experimentation with it. So, like, I can't say, "Oh, kiss me here, bite me here, pull this, whatever," if I haven't had those experiences, right? And I wouldn't know to have those experiences if I didn't know that. Oh, these are erogenous zones. If I didn't have the education. And like learning that, oh, these are erogenous zones. Oh, this can make sex better. Or, oh, sometimes bondage is fun. And like learning about different things, understanding different things, and then experimenting with them and seeing what you like changes the game. And being like, not being afraid to step outside of, I don't want to say societal norms, because it's not really societal norms. We just don't talk about it. Like, I feel like more people are into being choked and more people are into being tied up than actually talk about it. Because once I say, oh yeah, I like being choked, people are like, oh girl, me too. So let's talk about it. Like people, like the proper way. I don't know. It's just not being afraid.
So the question at the bottom of the screen, right, is how do we normalize the conversation around gender identity and or sexuality? How do we bring that to become something that it's not something that's brushed under the rug, right? Like, to your point, like let's stick on sexuality here, right? Chiz's head poked up when he said you like to be choked. You know what I'm saying? That's a natural reaction. We trying to see if my hands is big enough to reach around your throat. You know what I'm saying?
It's not even that. And so unless you have to make sure you're not choked, you're not
exactly
you're depressing a blood vessel. You're not blocking off an airway. So you
exactly.
don't have to do it all the way around my throat. So
and so the other thing that we saw back in the day, well, not back in the day, it's still going around, but like sex parties are like hush hush type events, right? Yeah. Sex toy parties are hush hush events, and we go back to societal norms.
I think that depends on your friend circle.
Okay. Yours is out loud. Okay, gotcha. But yeah, so we're going back to societal norms, and it looks like societal norms has suppressed the expression and the conversation around sexuality. How do we change that?
I think personally that we normalize it. We have to have the conversations. And like Chiz was saying that he's really uncomfortable. I think we all, we like to avoid what makes us uncomfortable. And when people push boundaries that we aren't comfortable with, it makes us feel uncomfortable. Even if they're around or, you're experiencing something, it's kind of like nothing becomes, you don't understand anything more unless you do it or you look into it. Like I can't expect to get better at math if I never do it. So I may have to sift through myself, like we do physical exercise, like we should do mental exercises, like and sift through ourselves to see what we really think, why we feel this way. Until we can normalize those conversations with ourselves, we can't expect to have them with other people. So I always tell people that the first journey begins with self. And it's easier said than done. Like, if I always tell people if mental health and self-identity measures were cool, everybody would be doing them. And we'd all be perfect and we all, could have a utopia, but that's just not the case. And so we have to do the hard work to make sure that we can, it's important. Like we don't have kids, but like even if I'm lucky enough to have kids one day, I want to be so confident in myself and who I am that they can have that same identity of assurance in who they are, no matter who they are or which direction they decide to go.
So I'm gonna put the fellas on the spot real quick. I know Jax and Jazz, you guys are good with this question. You with a young lady, and she's like, "Yo, bro, look, my man, I need you to spice this thing up a little bit." Who is expected to bring the conversation of toys up? She is or you?
I will.
Yeah.
Is that a so and that's the thing is like at what point in a relationship do you feel comfortable bringing that up? And Jazz and Jax, the only reason I put the guys on the spot is because I know you guys aren't hesitant to bring it up, right? But I just do Jax, I ain't putting you out there. But
who have you been talking to? Like, I want people to know that, like, I don't know what you're talking about.
But it's something that and not every man is comfortable enough to bring in the toy into their bed. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Not realizing, to Jack's point, the level of pleasures you bring her makes things better for you because that gawk may come right afterwards. You know what I'm saying?
For sure.
To be honest with you, I won't sit here and say like, oh, I'm like crazy experienced with using toys and stuff like that. Like, oh, it's something I'm always bringing up in a conversation. But probably after, a couple interactions, and just as you mold, that connection with that person and starting to ask like, what are some different things that you like? Have you ever tried this? Would you try this? Do you want to try this together? Maybe we go to a sex store together. I won't sit here and make it seem like it's something I've did with every partner or something like that I've had, but it's I just think it comes to a level of comfortability, really. And just when you feel comfortable, I don't think for anyone it should be a conversation that you try to force. It should just be something that kind of develops organically, really. And then, at some point when you're sleeping or potentially about to take it to that level of sleep with someone, you have those conversations naturally, like, oh, what do you like? What are you into? Like, so most times people are going to bring that up. I mean, or sometimes people will just be shy. I'm more of a person, like, I'd rather you just develop naturally, because I just feel like when you develop naturally and organically, it just makes that much more better, because you develop your own level of comfortability in the process. So that's just how I follow through with it. But it's not something like, you know, day 2 on the second date is like, oh, what toy do you want to use when we have sex or something like that. It's definitely something, you know, I think you just work into that experience and that journey with getting to know that person that you're dealing with, honestly.
And then there are different toys. Like, I think oftentimes when at least some of the male partners that I had, or I've primarily had male partners, most of the partners that I've had, whenever I brought up toys, and I truly mean most, they immediately thought about like dildos and penetrative toys. And I'm like, bruh, there's also suckling devices, there are beads, there are like
Rings.
there's so right, there are rings, like there's so many other things. And so they're like, oh, so I'm not enough. And I'm like, bruh, like, let's go to the store. Like, it's not even that I'm kind of hiding it for both of us, because rings change the game. They do, and people don't think about that. Like, they immediately go to, oh, I'm not enough, you want to get that. No, there are so many other toys that can be used that can heighten the experience for both parties, or all parties. You have more than 2 people there.
I think this is actually even I won't say a funny piece of the conversation, but I think we should notice how even the aura of feeling like, you know, one sector may not be as comfortable with toys as the other. Once again, why do you think that is? Why do you think that guys are automatically, you know, hesitant to talk about toys and different things like that? Personally, I feel like once again, it goes back to how we're molded. And the first thing you said is like, you know, it possibly makes me feel like I'm not enough. Like, why do you want to, you know, entertain other stuff in the bedroom? It's kind of like, well, you know, I feel like in life you should try to maximize anything you do. I'm not saying you got to be, you know, trying to overkill anything, but like, why would you not want to have a great sex life? Just like, why wouldn't you want to be as healthy as you could be? Why would you not want to, you know, have those dynamics and to have a balanced life? And so I think sometimes we can't be afraid to be balanced people, because it's actually pretty healthy, and that sometimes that's something that we never learn. And balance is key, and that goes for sex as well. So, you know, as a guy, like, I'm always open to, you know, the possibilities. Not saying that I'm gonna do anything, but I'll at least hear you out before I tell you no. Like, I'm not just gonna, you know, I'm not just automatically gonna shut you down if you know, come at me with what you may possibly like, because you got to have these conversations. I always find it funny how I call it fake intimacy, like how we want to take our clothes off of one another in the most intimate settings, but then not be intimate with one another. So, you know.
So you brought up a good point, Dominic, the whole fake intimacy. Do you think that, and this is a question to everybody, do you think that that you need to be emotionally and like intimate with someone who you are having sex with, or like in the case of like one night stands, or essentially one night stands, like how do y'all feel about those? Like, because I know a lot of people who say that they have to have an emotional or an intimate connection with someone in order to have sex with them. Is that something y'all seen across the board, or is that?
So I'm actually one of those people, to be quite honest with you. You know, this may come to a surprise to some people on this line, but I've never had a one night stand in my life, like never. I'm a person to where I need to connect with a person on some level of a mental or emotional point before I even take it to, you know, a sexual encounter. So yeah, that's me. I'm more of an emotional, mental person. The one night stands don't do anything for me. So for me, and I've learned that's probably what gets me in a lot of situations that I shouldn't be in, because I'm a really passionate and intimate person. So like, that's something that I've had to kind of learn as I got older. is how not to give myself, my full self, to a person so early. Because everybody doesn't necessarily deserve that all the time when you haven't developed that level of chemistry yet. Because I'm like 0 to 100 real quick once like I connect with you. It's like no boundaries. But yeah, I'm more of an emotional, mental person on that aspect. So yeah.
That was like beautifully said. The one part you're like, really like open yourself up to someone that felt like, I don't know, it's really.
Is this live again? I gotta edit that out.
I like to. I can't connect with you like fully until I know how we connect that way. So,
and yeah,
I'm not going
right?
down. So I'm not connected with anyone. So I like at life. I look at travel. I look at life. And I like to collect experiences. I like to experience new things. I like to see, what's out there. And I think everything in my life manifests itself that way. Not always. I think it took me a while to get to a place where I was like, no, if I want to try things, anything, I'm like, the only reason I won't try something is because I don't want to. I have no interest in it. Not because of what anything anyone in society thinks, not because I'm worried about, if someone's going to choose me in the end. Because I'm not worried about that. I choose myself every goddamn day. So I don't have like, I don't have to have a deep connection. I will say, and I don't know who's gonna watch this or not watch this, but I will say I've had experiences that were short term, we'll say, for what very 24-hour relationships. And they're like, I had someone say to them, like, no, like, I think they thought I was like in love with them or something. They were like, but these things happened. We talked about this, and I was like, it's a full experience from the time she was like, you can leave. From the time, that we're apart. And not that I haven't listened. I've fully fallen in love in a different country and been sad, but I've also fully just had an amazing time, and like can value that for what it is and keep it moving.
I'm like you, Jack. Like for real. Like I've definitely had stamps on my passport that weren't my passport.
I don't think they caught that one.
Okay.
I don't think they caught that one.
That needs to be explained. What's understood needs to be explained. But no, for real, like you have like these whirlwind 24-hour, 48-hour things, and sometimes it's super risky, like Dubai, where you're not supposed to be doing that, and other times it's right. Your girl almost got caught up. But yeah, I mean, other times it's not, and sometimes it's local. Like, and like Domonic said, you can leave. Like, I don't like to cuddle. Like, I'm not a big fan of cuddling. I get hot, so I often tell people, you can leave. Like, pass me a LaCroix on the way out, and I lock up. I know my neighbors. I lock up in a little bit.
Hilarious.
And that, I mean, it is what it is. So yeah. When I hear people, I understand that my mentality behind it is not the norm. Like the fact that I don't need to have this incredibly deep emotional and mental connection with you in order to have a great sex experience with you. It's great if I do, because it heightens it. It definitely heightens it, but I don't need it to have that with you.
And I think I'm along that same category. Like I feel like I'm a very intimate person, just naturally. It's levels to it. Like I'm not going to give, you level 10 if we just met, but naturally, I feel like I'm a very giving person. So I like to give experiences. I like to, build atmospheres. I like to, just be. I think I want to make sure that each person I'm with has a unique experience. Like most girls won't tell you that I've taken them to the same restaurant. Like I'm not that guy. So I try to, like, once again, just build relationships and let them organically go where they should be. I usually don't try to force things. And it's always served me pretty well. So I never really, thought thought about it from that standpoint, but I do think that, you know, balance is key. You know, sometimes that balance needs 24 hours, sometimes it needs a year or two. You know, it just depends on the dynamic between the two people.
I think that's interesting. Given this conversation, we're talking about sexuality, we're talking about gender. One of the bigger, it wasn't quite a buzzword as much as it was one of the bigger discussions was when Cardi and Meg came out with the WAP video, and we got all these think pieces about who should be wives and who are their husbands. And then my sister sent me Throat Baby the other week. And I listened.
That's a love song. Throat Baby is a love song.
Oh my God.
That's a love song.
I'm not old enough to listen to this, but the conversation around both songs was kind of like shocking because just the conversation that we had. So what I wanted to ask is, just a second, I got you, Jax. So why do we think in this day and age, in this society, why are women basically the sum of their sexuality while men get to thrive in it?
Because men feel as though they should control it.
Yeah.
Period. And they shouldn't. And
that's the answer.
That's it.
My
simple.
Thank you for coming. That's the show.
Yeah, we shouldn't. Period. Men feel like we're the only one that could be braggadocious about it and our sexual exploits, and we feel as though we shouldn't tell women, you know, to have that conversation. So I think the blow up behind WAP was just for me personally, and just for, I don't want to get too deep into it. It was more about the timing when WAP came out. We had just went through, you know, the shooting of Breonna Taylor and all these different things. It felt as though, and you know, if you guys would check out Culturally Focused, this is why I'm saying this, is that at that time when WAP came out, I just felt as though Cardi B and Meg Thee Stallion had already released enough music that was like that. And I just felt like culture-wise, they had an opportunity to really put out something that had a little bit more substance to it. That was my opinion with it. I didn't necessarily have a problem, you know, with the words, because man, I grew up with Akinelli. Like, come on, Akinelli and Little Kim. So it wasn't necessarily the topic. For me, it was more about the timing. But I said that on my platform the other day. I was like, yo, if we was tripping about WAP, we should have been tripping about Throat Baby, because for me, Throat Baby is off the chain. Like, it's way more explicit than WAP, way more explicit. And no one was in outrage about that one. So I'm just like, here we are again, just trying, you know, to really just control what women say. And that was my thoughts on it. But yeah, Throat Baby is off the chain. I don't know about it being a love song, but if you put it on after 2 a.m. at the club, you might get both. So
both.
I don't know what's better for you, Jax.
We have to send you the link after this.
Yeah, we'll send you the link.
My sister did tell me, my niece asked her what a Throat Baby was, and I mean, I can obviously make inferences, but I was like, I don't know. So this is the second time in 2 days that this has come up, and I'm just like, I don't know.
We're gonna get you help. We're gonna take care of you.
You've been in Costa Rica for the last 4 months, so we understand.
Yeah.
Right. Ask me about an island.
To your point about the timing of it, I mean, if we're being honest, Black people are killed by peace officers frequently. So if we are timing our music releases by that, we'll never get anything fun. Like, we'll never get anything with levity at all. So, I mean, and I feel like that's up to their label. Their label dropped that when they dropped it. It is what it is. And then your other point about, I don't want it to seem like I'm like coming in on you, but I've had these conversations before. So I love that you brought this up, because I've had these conversations privately. So I want to make sure I get this out publicly. As far as like, they could have put out something else. We don't say that about DaBaby. We don't say that about Lil Wayne. We don't say that about country artists. Like, we don't say that about Sam Hunt. We don't say that about Reba McEntire. They put out, they found their recipe and they follow that recipe. They put out what sells. They put out what works for them and what sells. And that's one of the things that I really don't appreciate. As a whole, when it comes to Black female rappers or female rappers, period. They're like, oh, you shouldn't be talking about your sexuality.
It's respectability
But it's
politics.
okay for Future to talk about it, for Drake, for Rick Ross, for all them. They've been talking about this, and it's okay for them. But for me to say, "Hey, I got a watch,"
do we want a freedom record? Do we want a freedom record from Cardi? Because I don't need that from Cardi or.
I mean, so I agree. I agree with you, but at that time, Lil Baby and DaBaby both had protest records out. You know, just for context here, they both had protest records out at that time. So just for context, I just felt as though at that time, you know, it was just more you use your voice for it. That's all.
I will say, especially being centered in the entertainment industry, I'll say my views changed when I entered this industry. Because of course, once again, being from a very conservative place and then looking at what the entertainment industry sells you, they sell you dreams. I always tell people, whatever you see on TV is fake. Like, you know, when I got onto rap sets and I realized that all the money they was throwing was fake, even if they had tons and tons of money, like, you know, it was fake. And so you're projecting an image onto a society, of course, but at the same time, like you were saying earlier, at what point do you realize this is entertainment? Like, Cardi B is not, you know, the spokesperson for anyone. She's an entertainer. Like, that's how she makes her money. So I feel like, yes, we're creatives and we have the ability to influence, but we can't expect people to wield their powers. That's kind of like telling people how to spend their money. It's just, to me, irresponsible to expect a higher standard than you're giving off, because I know I watched WAP. I watched it a few times, like, you know what I'm saying? So it'd be very, very hypocritical of me to expect Cardi B, who, like you said, she has tons of music like this in her catalog. Why would I expect her to change just because something happened in your life? You know what I'm saying? That sounds selfish because all of us were affected by it. But once again, projecting our thoughts and feelings onto those of others. And it's kind of like, you don't have to agree, but you gotta know what realm you're in and not expect unreal expectations from, you know, certain sectors.
Do you think we would listen to Cardi B if she put out a political album? Because she tried to speak up on one of those elections and they was like raking her through the coals.
But the one thing I always
she spoke out or spoke up for Bernie, and people
she often does.
Now get back on the poll.
Now let me ask you guys something. As far as entertainment goes, when has anybody done anything and everybody been completely happy about it?
Never.
Tell me a time. So, like, once again, taking everything with a grain of salt. Like, I'm not saying anything about. I'm not saying anything bad about Beyonce on live.
So this is definitely
no. I love Beyonce. Can I?
Go ahead.
I think, again, you said it briefly. I think it all goes back to respectability politics, which also goes back to colonization. I think we have, and I say Ghana, but like, I think we know, you know, hip movements and shaking and movement, body movement is a part of who we are. But we're in this country, in this space, where we've been told that means this, that, this, and the other. But in actuality, like, movement, and getting out pain and celebration through our bodies is who we are at our core. But yet we live in a country that tells us when we do these things, we can't do that and care about the rest of the world. But it's just not true. I think at the most sacred ceremonies in parts of Africa and in indigenous places, and the most celebratory, you see some of those same body movements. And not to say that's what Cardi is intentionally evoking, but like I think it all goes back to the colonizers told us it was bad, and we buy into it over and over again.
And so that goes back to the mental health aspect of things, right? I think there's over time been a conditioning of sex is bad. There's been a conditioning of separating men and women, especially within our community, right? The conversation easily went, well, Cardi B and Megan is bad. DaBaby
and whatever his name is, that's just status quo. That's okay for guys to do. And I think that's kind of where we are in a society of like, hey, you know, we're going to maintain this separation of sexuality between men and women, which has been something that's been done all of our lives. Because if you look back in slavery times, what was the one thing that the slave master would do to a wife of a slave, right? Do something to her sexually to make him feel lesser than a man. You know what I mean? And so, you know,
or him too.
Right. And so, you know, we want to be able to make sure that we have this space to talk about sex and sexuality so that we're no longer stuck in those constructs that don't include us. All right. And so with that being said, I'm going to transition into the final segment. And, you know, having talked about sexuality and how it impacts us mentally, the discussion on sexuality and gender, how do we move the conversation forward so that we can normalize the differences in our community, leading towards acceptance? In short, how do we move this conversation forward so that, you know, we can not necessarily change the minds of the Shizes in the world and the Ashleys in the world, but how do we move towards, you know, agreeing to disagree to almost a I'm seeing it, I'm understanding it, because we can't change people's minds overnight. Go ahead, Chiz.
Tag me in. I think this is the type of conversation that we need to have right here, to be quite honest with you. And what I want to say is I appreciate that we were able to have this dialogue and it didn't turn into a hate fest. You know what I mean? What I think we're also missing in our society when we have these conversations is being able to say, hey, come in, let's talk. I know we may not necessarily agree, but we can exchange ideas. I can hear your point of view and you can hear my point of view. I think sometimes people that may think like me or Ashley, okay, we are forced not to necessarily have a voice when it comes to these topics because we're ostracized a little bit. Like, I know you didn't mean to do it, you know, intentionally, Paige, like, you know, just for kicks and giggles here, but that's what happens. It's like, oh, Chiz and Ashley got a different opinion, you know, they're not, you know, the cool kids now, you know, or it's taken as, oh, Chiz doesn't agree with this, he must be homophobic, or he must hate trans people, he must hate gay people. Just because I necessarily don't agree with the lifestyle, we are demonized because of it. I think that portion of it needs to stop so these conversations can happen and you could create an open space for people to be educated about it. Because the moment you start saying, oh, you're a hater or you're a homophobe, you're, you know, a transphobe, you know, all those different things, it shuts people down and makes them walk away from it. So I just think we need to have more open conversations about it, and understanding that just because a person doesn't necessarily agree with something doesn't mean that they hate you in the process of it. So I'll leave it at that.
So I agree. I think that dialogue period, like conversations period, and it needs to start. I feel like this kind of stuff needs to start within the family, like within and at younger ages. Like we don't realize how much of a silo we're in until we have conversations like this with other people who didn't necessarily grow up with us. We have a lot of shared experiences, but we didn't grow up. I mean, you can tell that we all didn't grow up together. So yeah, I feel like we need to start having these conversations. Need to happen inside the home. I feel like they should also happen inside of schools. I feel like they also need to happen inside of churches. Like there's the constant conversation of demonizing others, like folks who are othered, without having a general conversation and figuring out why. Like, why are we saying that these people are wrong? Like, why are we saying that the way they live their life, the way who they are as people are wrong, and get to the root of that?
Agreed.
Jax or
What's the question? Like, are we just kind of like, how do we fix the world?
Well, it's not necessarily how do we fix the world, right? So how do we continue? Hey, buddy, how do we kind of promote this conversation such that, as mentioned earlier, a healthy dialogue continues to occur, right? Because that's really what change is about for the most part, is making sure that we can communicate our differences of opinions and leave with an understanding of the other party's point of view.
I think, in particular, this conversation, I realize in a lot of my sorority sister just got here. I think a lot of the things that separate us, we should look at where those separations began. I think oftentimes in this conversation, for me, I thought back to like, oh, this shit started with colonization, or this shit started with patriarchy. And I think that those things are in place very specifically. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but it's history. It's not us that started these separations. It's not even our, people like to say, oh, they didn't have these troubles back in the day. There were different troubles, but we all should think about how we got here, and not to say like who the real enemy is, but where those separations began and how can we come back to whole as people, as like relations between men and women and others, with our community and our roots. That's all I got. Sorry, they're having a whole thing in my living room now.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think the biggest thing is to once again realize we're strong together. Especially like this is about Black sexuality. And when we talk about Blackness, especially in America, there are so many things on the outside trying to tear us down. And realizing that like we are all one community, whether we want to realize it or not, especially in the eyes of others. Of course, we know we have plenty of subsectors within our community, but I always tell people nobody respects that outside of us in America. Like we have to teach people how to respect us because they haven't for so long. So I think we just have to normalize it, being accepting and loving and respectful of one another, giving each other that space to once again be who we are. And I feel like once we can accept people in their own space, we really can. We always talk about Black unity and Black community. I feel like we can truly start being a community then once we start to master those things. I'm hopeful because these conversations once again are happening, and I feel like we're going to be the generation that does start making a difference because it has been so taboo to talk about stuff like this. But like, look at us, like we're here, and we're doing it. And so this hopefully, this even helps somebody to not be afraid to have a conversation with maybe somebody next to them. And that's how the world changes, literally one person at a time, man. We can't be afraid to do that.
I love it. I love all of y'all's responses. I thank y'all so much. This has been a great session. We're going to have like a part 2 where we talk about some more different aspects of sexuality, because we could literally talk about that for hours, but we really can't. Thank y'all so much for coming. I thank everybody that tuned in. Before we leave, all of y'all's information is in the description below, but I know Chiz has Talking Black tomorrow night, I think. What all do y'all have coming up that you need the people to know about? Shows, blogs.
I will say I don't talk about any of my sex stuff. Like it's like all forthcoming. I like, I'm mastering all of my things. But I am launching a candle subscription box next month, and I'm very excited about that. And that's the only thing I can, we'll talk about. So it's Your Candle Concierge. So
congratulations.
And the Instagram and stuff. I'm so excited. That's all I got. But I mean, you can find me on Instagram. If you find me, you find me. If not, I'll see y'all later.
Go ahead, Chiz.
No, go ahead.
Domonic, was that you talking?
Yep.
Yeah, I'm about to say, you go ahead. You have the floor, ma'am.
So I am on all platforms as And All That Jazie, which is in my lower third. I think that's where it is. I'm a blogger, a podcast. I haven't dropped a podcast episode in a few weeks. It's been busy, but I have one coming out soon. So yeah, like and subscribe below. Like and subscribe me too. You can click the link in my bios on all of my platforms to find my blog and where I can be found around the internet.
Dope. You guys can find me pretty much on all social media platforms. I'm on IG probably the most. So if you need to get in contact with me, that'll probably be the easiest way. My personal page is TL Activist. And do podcasts called Connected Dots Podcast, where we talk about community events. We talk about what's going on in the nation, current events. It's on every Tuesday on all platforms. So check us out, Connected Dots. Jax, we're gonna have to talk. I'll definitely be checking out your candle subscription box because I own a candle company. It's called So Mississippi Candle Company. SoMississippi.com. Make sure to go check it out. I'll make sure you guys get some really cool in the mail. So I'll get y'all addresses after this, and we'll make sure to complete this circle. And I'll definitely be supporting you, Jax, because I'm all about supporting my people. So looking forward to it.
Chiz.
Hey man, Talking Black tomorrow, 7 o'clock. Some of this, some of that, as long as it's black. Y'all know how we do. Shout out to my co-host Alexis. She was in the comments a little bit. But yeah, check me out. You already know I'm always doing. I try to stay busy. So coachfullyfocused.com at coachfullyfocused. I am a huge candle connoisseur. I like to set the ambiance in my house here and there with my hookah and my wine and stuff. So I will definitely be supporting both of you when it comes to candles because I absolutely love them. But outside of that, as usual, giving Paige and Ashley your flowers. Another dope episode with for sure guests as well. Appreciate y'all for continuing. I'm gonna use my line, protecting the culture. Okay. All right, keep it up.
Don't forget Culture Focused News. Don't forget to plug that now.
Hey man, we gonna talk about that later, Paige.
All right.
But I appreciate everyone. I will look to connect with. If anybody knows anything about me, I'm just like my brother said. I love supporting and working with the culture. So I already see multiple different ways we all could collab on different things. So don't run from me when I jump in your inbox. All right, and be like, let's collab on some of these conversations or some different things that you have going on in your individual community. So peace and blessings, peace and love. Appreciate it 100%.
All right. So Atomic Travels presents Travel Tuesday Happy Hour Season 2. We drop next week on YouTube. I interviewed about 38 individuals from 5 to 6 different countries.
Wow.
Over the course of the last year, and it's been an amazing journey. I'm a perfectionist, so I've been kind of pushing it back, but I finally am putting it out. Website is out, podcast is out. It's been interesting. I got some merch that may be dropping with the episodes as well. So please feel free. I'm taking a page out of Chiz's book, trying to take advantage of the merch opportunity. So, one of the things that, this podcast has done for me, and I'll say thank you, Ashley, is giving me the courage to kind of like step outside of myself. So, brothers like Chiz kind of continue to push the envelope for himself. And, once again, appreciate you, Ashley, for having me on as a co-host.
I appreciate you for keeping it together and in order. I thank y'all so much for your contribution. Y'all is almost as y'all are more awesome than I imagined y'all would be. Thank y'all so much, and bye.